I just want to let you know we are going to be recording this tonight. My name is Rebecca Dallinger, and I'm the curator in residence for the Big River Continuum. Um, we'd like to ask everybody to keep their mics on mute and to, as we go here, feel free to put questions in the chat. Any questions you may have for Karen, Monique, or myself. We do have two other folks that may weigh in on a few questions. Jonathan Schilling, the director of the Itasca Field Station, and also Boris Oicherman from Weisman Art Museum, and maybe May from Studio in the Woods. So we're going to start off by introducing ourselves, and then we have a short presentation that we just want to show you some of the work we've been doing and tell you a little bit about Big River Continuum. And then we will really make this more of a dynamic conversation and begin to really talk about things that are interest of you. So I'll start by introducing myself. I live here within the White Earth Nation in northern Minnesota, in the town called Ogama, in the Sugarbush Township, not too far away from Strawberry Lake. I have been living in White Earth for the last 12 years and raising two children that are Native and a bit of white girl from Boston, like myself. And we lived here and I've been working with the Big River since it began as a residency in 2019. And see if Karen or Monique want to go next.
Halito, hi everyone. My name is Monique Verdin. I'm here at the very end of the Mississippi River, here in the Delta, where the fresh and salt waters meet. I am in a place that's known better as New Orleans, but is really Bulbuncha, which means in the Choctaw tongue, Muskogee language, place of many languages or place of many tongues, because this was a site of trade long before the colonizers sailed in. And these are the homelands and the migration places that folks found safe refuge in, just as so many migratory birds and all of the swimming things that come here to continue the regeneration of life. But the Homa Nation, which I am from, which is also mixed with many of the other nations that have called this fertile delta home, the Shada, the Choctaw, the Shitamacha, the Washa, Shawasha, the Shapatulis, the Bayou Gula, the Biloxi, the Tunica, the Takapa Ishak, the Akola Pisa, and many names of nations that I'm not mentioning, and all of those that have been erased. And I'm very grateful to be with all of you.
Anin, my name is Karen Goulet, Chibanese-Kwe, Indigenous Makwa and Dodom. I'm from the White Earth Nation, but I'm also French Cree Métis from my father's side. So I wanted to note that because that will come up in the discussion. I live in Bemidji, which is right in the heart of Ojibwe country, Anishinaabe people. We have 3 reservations that surround us, the Red Lake, Leech Lake, and White Earth Nation. And we're in the middle of that. And we're also, Bemidji references, it's a place where the Mississippi travels through the lake. That's what the name's about. I'm really excited to be, and I just have to remember a couple of nations because of Dakota, we have a history with the Dakota people who were here before us. And we traveled here, and we'll get into that a little bit more. I'm really happy and excited to be part of this project and this idea of connecting with each other through the metaphor of water and caring about the water. And our Indigenous ancestors, I think, are really happy that we're here today having this conversation.
So this is what we've used for the graphic, which Monique designed. And I wanted to see if she could just describe what this map is. I've had some questions previously. Monique?
This is an old map that I found in. I'm a huge fan of the New York Public Digital Library and all of these old historical maps. And this is part of the lower part of the Mississippi, and just the old river and where the river is now, and how the river is so different in these two places. I've been working with maps quite a bit, and so we'll see maps throughout this presentation. But this was right before, or taken right after there was the 1927 flood, I want to say. So, but I can get more details on that. I'm sorry, I was supposed to. I've had so many maps in my life recently, but I will find more information and I can share that through our web channels.
Here's another map that Monique provided that just shows the course of the headwaters of the Mississippi, where the Big River Continuum Project has begun up in northern Minnesota in Itasca State Park, all the way down to the deltas of Louisiana into the Gulf of Mexico. This just I don't know if Monique, you have anything else you want to share about this map? You brought it forward, but it's a great illustration to just see how it travels through the whole country,
Yeah, I mean, I think that, most people don't know where their water comes from in general. And I was like 30 years old before I realized that the water that I bathed with and the water that I, used to make coffee in the morning, was coming out of the tap. And my grandmother was always adamant about having a cistern. And at 30, when I realized it was coming out of the river, I was like, oh, she is a smart woman, especially, I'm here just in the heart of what they call Cancer Alley, just north of the dead zone, which are these algal blooms that happen every summer. And so, just the river has been this life force that, connects us all. 41% of the continental US and 2 Canadian provinces are draining into this river, into this waterway, and just how it's, when you look at it, it also is like, oh, all of these veins, right? And we can also debate like where does the river really start? And I think that, in going to Lake Itasca, it was this real kind of reminder that the river has been used since colonial times as a dividing line. But the truth is that the river is what connects us all. And so, I love these visuals. This is, of course, from the U.S. Geological Survey. But yeah, I think that knowing that maps are the colonizers' tools, but also that maps help us to recognize, and to try to define and to see, to see how we're linked.
So at the headwaters, we're in Itasca State Park itself, which before that was indigenous territories of Anishinaabe and Dakota. The park itself is the oldest state park in the state of Minnesota. It's one of the most visited parks and has 32,500 acres. It's also a place where the prairie meets the pines and meets the hardwoods. So it's this beautiful ecosystem that's very rich and has a very rich history. We're close to Leech Lake, Red Lake, and within White Earth Nations as they all intersect. And we'll get more into those pieces later. But 10,000 years ago, this all was formed by glaciers. And that's where you have this rolling landscape that conceals over 100 lakes. within that pine, that spruce, that birch, and maple forests. But Big River Continuum itself began in around with Boris Ojibwe, the creative collaboration director at the Weisman Art Museum in the University of Minnesota, in a way to bring people together and start to ask the question about how do we consider the river itself as a way of knowing, and to bring arts organizations and community organizations together to see like how could we create a residency program and dynamic exchanges between artists, our local communities, scientists, and to really start to create this inquiry and story interconnectedness between both the river and the land environments. Um, but we need to always remember that, you know, Minnesota is actually, Minnesota is a Dakota word for cloudy water or sky tinted water. And that everything has come from Native peoples and the truth of the land and the truth of the language of even the name Minnesota. Misiziibi is the Ojibwe word for the Big River or the Mississippi itself. This is actually a picture. You could see the tamaracks over on the left. This is actually a picture where it does show the cloudy water reflected in the Mississippi itself. So this place-based creative collaboratives from this end at the headwaters, two artists were brought forward from a studio in the woods. That'd be Monique and Karen from White Earth Nation and from our area up in Headwaters. And this was a creative collaboration that continues forward with a studio in the woods, with in Louisiana, 25-year plus residency program, with the Weisman Art Museum and creative collaborations there at the University of Minnesota, the Itasca Biological Station, and Jonathan Schilling here, which is part of the Itasca State Park, and also includes the Watermark Art Gallery and Watermark Art Center, which is in Bemidji, and Karen works there. They're going to be carrying a show forward later. She'll tell me more about that. But this creative collaboration also is with a lot of community folks. On the left-hand side, you see a picture of basically Upper Rice Lake. One of the ricers from White Earth was just coming off the lake. And I said, can I shoot it? I was out with an elder friend, and he was like, sure. And this was his take for the day. This is unfinished rice. You guys remember this picture? This was 2019 when Monique first came for her 3-week residency, pre-COVID in October. And this is right on Itasca Lake.
Yeah, I'll just pick up here. This is I've gotten really into these kind of digital collage maps, using a lot of United States Geological Survey maps, but then other historical maps too, and then taking photographs in the specific places that are within the territories that are found within the map. And I just created these recently. They've been really it's been a fun thing for me to do. And to think about time, and to think about place, and to think about territories, and how old trade routes get erased or renamed, or fill in the blank. So this map that's layered beneath the photograph that I took on Lake Itasca, and the tamaracks were changing colors. I learned that that they were the conifer that changed colors up there, the only conifer that changed colors. And similarly in the Delta, we have a bald cypress, which at the fall it turns red and loses all of its nettles. But this map is from the 1830s, and it was really interesting for me to learn that Lake Itasca Schoolcraft had an Indigenous guide, was married to an Indigenous woman, and his Indigenous brother-in-law led him to the lake, and then he claimed it, right, which is like classic, and renamed it. That it was called Lake Elk Lake. In the Indigenous language. And so this map is really, I just find it really fascinating, from the 1830s, which really, you know, and we're speaking in geological time, is not that long ago. And to also think in historical time how much changes, and how names have disappeared and those that have remained. And so I had gone up to the headwaters in 2019, and it kind of, you know, blew my mind. I got to go ricing. I saw the leaves change in that change of season. And then I did a crazy thing, which was I got in a canoe with some strangers at Baton Rouge, which is the state capital here. You know, I paddled the river for about a week, and camped on the banks. And I had no idea there was islands in the middle of the river down here. But I felt like I had experienced it in such its pristine state, and then suddenly I was in the heart of Cancer Alley, and part of this Anthropocene investigation with also international folks from all over the world, who were kind of looking at this amazing magical place that also is like very complicated and complex. And so here is an image taken from when I probably should have been paddling, because we were like super tankers and, you know, tugboats. They'd be like pushing, you know, 20 barges or something at a time. But this is a grain. So the other image, the tamaracks were there, but you could also see the wild rice. I'll just go back. You can see the wild rice in the foreground. And I'll let Karen tell the story of the wild rice and how it's a sign of survival for the Anishinaabe. But this is a grain elevator, so the port is here at the end of the river, is of course moving all of that middle of America grains out into international markets. But layered beneath it is this map from the 1860s, which is an old military map. And of course, the territory looks very different now. But yeah, just thinking about these two places and how different and yet they're connected, you know, and that meaning biologically and also socially, culturally, and economically. Karen, do you want to talk about the rice?
Oh, sure. So the rice is our soul food for our people, and our prophecies, our origin stories talked about. We started probably, well, we did start on the coast somewhere, maybe Nova Scotia, we're not sure. We have parts of our ceremonies that are connected to the seawaters, things that we use, but we were instructed through prophecies to travel to the place where the food grew on the water, and we would know when we got there. So it took some time, some generations, I suppose, and we got here and the wild rice was there, and we knew that was our food that grew on the water. And we the Dakota were here, and we kind of had scuffles with them. We have a complicated relationship with the Dakota people, but we also are here now, and the Ojibwe is one of the largest populations of Indigenous people on the North American continent, particularly if you disregard the European boundaries between Canada and the United States. So we're in Ontario, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and probably a little bit further east and a little bit further west. But it's we use it for many things, but it's a staple that we have, and we have these ways of processing it that have been passed on through generations. And so when we share our rice with you, we're sharing our love with you. I can tell you that. So
Karen, I just drove Karen to the airport yesterday. She arrived on the train about a week ago, and I brought her out to one of my most favorite places in the world, a studio in the woods. A studio in the woods is a really special place. It's technically in Orleans Parish, so part of the metro area, but like as far as you can go downriver. And it's been a really transformative place in my life. And I always say that a studio in the woods kind of introduced me to all my best friends. And so Karen and I have been on a bit of a journey with each other. But yeah, there's all this beautiful work. So I don't know, Karen, I have the slides here, and I can go with it how you want. If you want to talk about, yeah, share with us about how I
Okay,
mean, we
well,
didn't really get to debrief a whole lot. There was a lot going on, so.
yes. Well, I think first of all, to say that it kind of took some time. That I was to have gone down there last March was the original plan, and then COVID, put that on halt. And so what I ended up doing, I is going into a at-home residency. So my Misiziibi detour, and I did a blog and did artwork and writing and different things during the time that I was originally supposed to be down at Studio in the Woods. So, I did that, I went that, and then I kind of went on with things, and I was able to come down to Studio in the Woods May 9th, actually, Monique, 3 weeks. and meet really wonderful people. And I think that I was able to pick up and continue working on my pieces. The fabric pieces are scrap pieces they're all my scrap materials that I have from making my star quilts and blankets and ribbon shirts and skirts and things like that. So I was taught to embroider by my father, who was taught by his mother. And so this is sort of the stitching is on both sides of my family. So I grew up watching people stitch. And so to clothe us and to take care of us, but there was also like this beauty or this attention to craft that was really important and to know. So these pieces are kind of like my honoring of that, my honoring of my family, and to waste not, want not, of course, like you saved everything. And so these pieces are sort of like little field notes or vignettes of memory of things that have happened in my life. And a lot of times I start out with a piece, just starting to put it together, and then the story unfolds. In this particular case, I think the red fabric, this piece is called They Went to Find Him. And it's a story about my son was actually over in the middle of the ocean on a rock in Hawaii for about 10 years. And this story is about our thunders, the spirits going over and making sure that he's okay. So that piece I created for him and thinking about him a lot. So sometimes they're very like specific stories. They're about 11 by 11 inches is approximate size of each of these pieces, so that you guys can kind of get a sense of that. And so I kind of like put them away for a few months, and then I just picked them back up down at Studio in the Woods. So I've got like 5 of them done again. And so I'm up at about somewhere 21, 22 pieces that I've done. And I guess I'll keep making them until I'm done making them. So the piece on the left is a bigger piece. I do a lot of mixed media. I save everything that I ever do. So this one is called A Spectacular Departure on the left, and it's like maybe 18 by 11 or 14, and it's paper. I stitch on the paper. I do a lot of hand stitching on a lot of different things. And then these are prints. I will do prints. I'll do things and not be quite satisfied with the result, but I hang on to them. So some of these prints and things that I work with are decades old. This one is maybe only like 7 or 8 years old, the background before it comes to me. So the work is either very spontaneous, and that's both with writing and with art. It just sort of comes immediately, or it takes years to unfold. The right-hand piece is called The Beauty in the Blues, and it's thinking about a lot of different things. And one of the things we have is this endangered butterfly in Minnesota that is this beautiful blue butterfly, and it kind of is down in one location. I think there's some of them over in Wisconsin as well, but they're kind of they're sort of bringing them back to life. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of them right now, but I sort of honor them and their cycle of surviving. Somebody might know who they are, but anyway, so this is kind of talking about that, and that idea of there's a beauty in all kinds of blues, whether it's the music. I was thinking about down in New Orleans where music was started, where the blues is very, and I got to hear some wonderful music. So it's a metaphor for many different things, I guess. There's several different things were on my mind at the time I made this piece.
Hey, I'm wondering if everyone can just mute themselves, because I'm getting a little bit of feedback. So I just want to thanks. And I also I thought that was a really nice segue, Beauty and the Blues, if maybe you wanted to share a poem with us.
Oh, you're so good, Monique. so thank you. Yes, I will. My writing was something else I got to tend to during the my Mississippi detour, and I was really, really happy about that. And it's another thing, the poems come right out, or they take years to complete themselves. And this is one of those that had been lingering for us quite some time. So this one is called Watermarks. A soft voice masks the fierce currents of desire and memory left behind in stories now told by shifting stones and riverbanks. Forever bound and forever lost to each other, these forces surrender what they cannot hold to the river currents that answer only to movement and change. How do we find the rest of who we are now lingering in the residue of other more tumultuous days? The changing truth of our existence finds clear and mutable reflections in the countless lakes and rivers moving steadily beneath sensuous skies. Their constant gestures render Earth into a damp landscape of prolific vegetation and subtle terrain. This evening, the waters are radiant as they reflect everything they see. A flowing story that somehow satiates the moments of longing that rest silently between us. Before it is too late, I will tell you how the waiting has filled me today. It is a relentless absence, the kind described in the humid sighs of a heaven suspended above the anticipation of a dry earth, calling to the summer rain it longs for. Relief is a thick and sultry presence sensed long before its occurrence. Ancient sounds spill into the landscape of my hunger as a storm announces its intended arrival, what the resonance that assures the inevitable rain and turbulence it will bring. And yet at this moment, in a tenuous calm near the edge of the storm, it is the sun resting serenely on the water that allows me to see the many reasons we are still here.
That's so beautiful. Thank you. The it's thundering here right now. Like while you were reading, it was like "Grrr." When Karen arrived that night, we had the most like wicked lightning storm that I've ever experienced in my entire life, actually. It was like unreal. And I had to let Karen know, I was like, I think the thunder beings know that you're here and are welcoming you. This is not normal.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, I'm from a land of thunders and storms, and this one was so impressive. I was like, okay. It was like lit up like daylight. And so actually one of the pieces I made was sort of an homage to that experience. So oh, this is a collage of some of the things I was doing down there. And so starting from the upper left, Monique and I was trying to figure out how I wanted to think about talking about connections and the relationship to the water. And I had decided I wanted to bury fabric and kind of get these DNA impressions of the land, of the Delta DNA. I liked your title or your name, Monique. I think it was Delta DNA or something.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to think it was going to change. I knew it would change, like the material was going to be come out different from different places. So I sort of had this idea of braids, and braids is a great metaphor for a lot of things. But so what we did is I got sheets and tore them down and braided them up, and then we put them in significant places around the river. And I'll let Monique tell a little bit about the locations. And the idea is we'll keep them in the ground for 3 weeks or a month and see what impressions and what the soil gives to those, to the what kind of impressions and what it's going to leave in the fabric. And then they'll be displayed as one big installation sculpture when we're done with them. And I wanted the idea of this continuity. I thought the braids would create some sort of pattern. So we'll see if that's real or not. It's just a theory. I made paper, and we went out and collected plants from around the area to put into this paper making. And my son happened to come and meet me at the time. It was his birthday, and he really got into the paper making and was really quite helpful in helping me figure out. And he did a lot of the work that will continue to create more of that. So it's sort of like this, looking at the what the land has and what exists in the Delta environment. And I will also collect things up here and make some more paper. So it was really a wonderful thing to do. The one in the bottom left, I loved the one, that house. The colors, everything about the French Quarter was pretty wonderful. And it was like an experience that I've wanted to have for a long time. So there's just this use of color, and I'm kind of a color junkie, and I like working with that. So that was a place that, I could live there. Maybe I could live there, but I think I could live there for a while. And then the right piece is one of the pieces, and I think it's called Rising. Possibly I hadn't come up with a title, but that's one of the pieces that I did during my time at studio.
Yeah.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Oh, these are kind of like little sections of all the different pieces that I worked on. And so I brought just a little bag of my stuff just to be sure, with ribbon and fabric scraps. But there are also, the bottom left-hand quadrant of this image is a piece that I made with scraps that were left behind by other artists. They had this wonderful collection of stuff. So I dug through there and created a piece that honored my time and thought about all these people that have come through Studio in the Woods, because it's really quite this magical place of creative thinkers and people who apply their creative thinking and their creative processes to things that improve the world and give the world beauty, give the world things to think about, challenge. And so I really like this idea of having these little sort of glimpses into past artists and what they brought here and what they were thinking about when they were working. So, and that's just kind of a close-up of the way I work. Most of the work is handwork. There's a little bit of stitching, a little bit of machine stitching, but I found myself primarily doing my hand stitching for all of the pieces. Oh, this was a thing I was so glad I got to do. I learned how to take pictures of water samples with my iPhone through the microscope because we couldn't quite get the microscope hooked up to the computer. And I wanted to get some images, and the gentleman's name was, what was his name? Tim, from Tulane. I can't remember. Do you remember? Huh?
Matt.
Oh, I'm sorry, Matt. And what was his last name? Matt. Anyway, Matt was this wonderful guy that went out and got water, brought the, and I'm terrible with names, sorry. It takes me about 4 times of asking to remember. But he brought water samples from the Mississippi, and we sat down and looked at these really incredible things that, and for me, it's, they've got these scientific names and they're these things that are in the water, but I also see like the images and the imagery that's in there that reminds me of other things. So I really loved this piece. I don't know if we have a close-up of it, but it kind of reminded me of some of the petroglyph images that are down in Taos, the rock art that's down there. And I was just kind of stunned and I saw that when I was working with Leslie, showed me water up north here, and I'm going to go look at more water. So I'm thinking about, what does the water give us, and what is it that we don't see with our eye that's living and breathing and part of that that ecosystem that we rely on in our world. So
I always say, I get asked to do land acknowledgements quite often now, which is a really great practice. And it also is, as my Bulbuncha collective comrades say, it's one thing to say a land acknowledgement, but what does it mean to be in real relationship, and to really recognize? So have also been like, well, here in the Delta, if it wasn't for the river, we would have no land. So I've been trying to always do, when I get asked to do a land acknowledgement here, I actually do a river acknowledgement. And she's been mighty full this springtime, and lots of water, and it's raining again. We've had tons of rain. But this image here, again, another one of these maps, and I have a dear colleague, Jacob Rosenzweig, who created this for us years ago when we were in creation with a documentary film that is available online through PBS called My Louisiana Love. But this, kind of highlighted area is the Mississippi River Delta, and you can see the Mississippi going down to the Bird's Foot. But the river's been shifting course. It's about between 5,000 and 8,000 years old. And you can see there's this Atchafalaya River that's on the western edge. And so Karen and I were planting these braids at a studio in the woods, which is at English Journal. I have another map for that. I can kind of point it out. My family land is down Bayou Terrebuff, which was the Mississippi River a couple thousand years ago as well. And Terrebuff in French, terre à buff, land of beef, really land of bison, because this is one of the southeastern most points where bison would make their migration to. But we also planted some in Old Algiers Point, which is just right across the river from where the old colonial quarters are, but has been a historic place where unfortunately was used as a site where many enslaved folks were held before being sold at New Orleans, in the city of New Orleans, or Bulbuncha's marketplaces. But also has a lot of like spiritual history and hoodoo medicine over on that part of the river. And then I told Karen, I was like, all right, I got to take you like across the delta. Like I took her, you know, we were on the eastern side and we went all the way to the western edge. And the Bayou Teche is the oldest distributary of the delta and edges along what is called Acadiana, known as Acadiana because there were the Acadians, which were French folks that were kicked out of England and made their migration here to the Louisiana Territory, actually, when the Spanish had control of the territory, but were welcomed as settlers and were put out in this kind of prairie land. So we buried some of the braids there as well. So these impressions at different parts of the delta lobe will be in the delta DNA of the braids. So there's this place called Arnaudville. It's where two bayous meet, the Bayou Teche, old distributary of the Mississippi, and the Bayou Fusilier, and it's old Attakapas Ishak territory and a trading grounds. And there's a lot of really interesting things going on there in regards to creative placemaking, and it's in a rural community about 30 minutes northeast of Lafayette. That is the biggest town, which is a little college town as well, a little Cajun college town. They have this facility called St. Luke's, which they're turning into this kind of immersion, multifaceted facility. There's some universities, NYU and LSU, and some folks from the University of Lafayette were there the day that we were granted access into this shell of an old hospital that they're breathing new life into. And Karen disappeared. I got all excited. We were in this room and there was all of this brown cotton. They're growing brown cotton there, and it's just beautiful. There's a photograph of it here in this image on the right-hand side. And there were all these like different kinds of looms and weaving things and all kinds of stuff, which I have no idea what it is, but I was like so excited, and I go looking for Karen. And she was in this genealogy room and has been telling me these stories of looking for this long lost grandmother of hers, with the story of coming up from the Louisiana Territory. And Karen thinks that in this book she may have found a link to this Karen, do you want to share?
Well, yes, it's on my dad's side. We have this grandmother who kind of appeared out of nowhere and didn't have any connections up in Canada. And yeah, so my cousin, I'm like, I'm going down, you got to give me the information you can give me. And so she sent me names and we kind of had this little exchange. And so I was looking for the I just thought I'm just gonna look. And so the Smete or Joseph and Esther, like it says he's from Quebec. And the thing was, my understanding is our relatives were sent out of Canada when the British came in and beat the French, I guess, and they went down to Louisiana, and then they came back up, and there's this sort of ambiguous kind of like what exactly happened. So it was really meaningful for me because that place had a particular, I felt good there, and I felt really good that maybe this connection, my cousin who's a genealogy sleuth in the family was quite excited, and we're gonna talk some more and I'll get back there at some point. But the fact that there's these records, the thing that I noticed, and there's people, everybody, not everybody, but just about everybody I met was very connected to history, and they had very specific information and knowledge about history, the history of their community or the communities and the different people that are there. And I thought that was really, really important to note. And so who knows what'll come of it, but it had a very, it had great significance for me, and maybe we'll finally be able to find her and I'll be able to like be settled about that. So this is one of the braids and how we kind of dug into the ground, maybe what, a foot and a half, and in different places. And so this is one of Monique's beautiful, I said, oh my God, you made it look so beautiful. So she got this great, she took a lot of pictures of the process of laying them. And so we'll see what happens when they come out of the ground. But I I love this image, so I gotta get a copy of it. But this is our kind of our collaborative project that we're working on.
Yeah, experimental, and yeah, I really it's been great, and it's really exciting, like to be in collaboration with kind of these stewards of the folks whose like backyards we buried the braids in too. A dear friend who's an herbalist, and then also at the site of New News, which is this community center and really a magnet for so much in Acadiana right now. So it's great to be in community. Um, I'm sharing this image here and this quote. I was interviewed by, there's a water literacy program here called the Ripple Effect, and they've been working with youth, elementary folks mostly, but it's always kind of like expanding and growing. And they have this new curriculum that they've just released, and it's interviews with all of these stakeholders, and I've been in dialogue with them, and so they were like, "Hey, Monique, can we take your picture? Where do you want your picture taken?" And my first thought was like, "Oh, I want you to take my picture at the Army Corps of Engineers calls risk reduction, because they can't promise levee protection." So behind me is this huge structure. It's over 20 feet tall, concrete on the top, and there are like these sheets of sheet pile that are about 150 feet down. So this we were outside of risk reduction infrastructure. So when a storm comes, there's a gate that closes and holds the water out. So we're very much so getting to a point where, South Louisiana is losing land at one of the fastest rates on the planet. The kind of dumbed down statistic, but it's the best one that we got for people to get their heads around it, is that every 90 minutes a football field is lost from our shores. And that has just been kind of being monitored since the 1930s, and not in its entirety, but we've had over 10,000 miles of canals that have been dredged through our wetlands. Subsidence is naturally happening, but because of extraction, that's been exacerbated, creating these like faults and sinks. As well as, sea levels are rising, and they're rising at a much more rapid rate than scientists had predicted. So we're up against a lot here, and I think that education is so important. And I just like, the ripple effect is a great example of like the fact that we need to be talking to fourth graders. It's great to be talking to the adults, but we really like, if we're really going to move and shape things, we need to have kind of a baseline understanding of the dynamics of the Delta and our connection to the river, of course, too, and water. Water is life, and we need to know where our water comes from and where it goes, and how to live more in collaboration with it. Again, here's my pal Jacob Rosenzweig's one of his maps, and just for folks to know, what is blue would be the lowest elevation, and what is yellow and that lime green is the higher elevation. So the levees, in the 1927, after 1927, the Federal Army Corps of Engineers came in and put in this levee system. And so what is at the levee is usually the highest, except for when we have high water, which then, as you can see, actually the river is quite high at this time when the satellite imagery was taken. So in many places, the river is higher than most of our land. And I live to the, so my home is along the Bayou Terrebuff, which you can see on the right-hand corner. There's like a little high ridge that goes out. And Karen, technically, a studio in the woods is like right across the river from there, which takes quite a while to get there, because you can only take a ferry or you got to drive all around. There's only one bridge. My time at Lake Itasca, it was really funny. I kept thinking about how I felt like I was in a mirrored image of a place that of my home. It was really funny, and especially I felt this when I went out with Simon to go racing, and Rebecca had set up this introduction to Simon, and he was like, "Yep, meet me at 2 lakes on the side of the road. Bring a hat, and you gotta get a racing license. You could probably pick one up at the gas station, you know." And I'm like, okay, cool. And then I suddenly felt like I was with my cousin in a P row, and he even was like using a push pole, and we're just like cruising through the rice, and it felt so familiar in this really kind of funny way that I of course never gone ricing in my life, but it was great, and of course, yeah, the food that grows on water. I love that Karen called it soul food. And I made a lot of friends, Shirley and Sharon, 2 sisters who are amazing, knowledge keepers and
Oh
just
yeah.
good fun. And also Leslie at the Itasca field station, and just us talking about water and thinking about water, and took me for a boat ride right before the boats got pulled out for the winter time, and of course being with Karen and being able to see a place in a way that as a tourist I never would be able to experience, and so being able to participate in ceremony, and also being able to be in relationship with the plant materials that I was introduced to, and really felt like I just barely got to know. So I'm looking forward to going back up. And that was something that we definitely talked of. We had no idea that COVID was going to happen at that time, but just recognizing that places change, that seasonally they change, that in this time of the climate crisis, it's changing, for me to tell Karen, like, the lightning isn't like that, which I kind of felt like my grandma a little bit, like, but that places are changing, and to really know a place, you have to know it in all of its ways. And so yeah, I'm excited to go back in summertime, which will be racing time again. But it's also a little bit earlier than I was there last time. So looking forward to like harvesting and learning more about the plants, and of course about the people, and to be in relationship with the water. I'm trying to be like hardcore about not having air conditioning. And I'm feeling a little bit like, oh my gosh, Karen, you're so glad that you left yesterday.
Am I?
Really steamy. I just wanted to share a little bit about some collaborative projects that I'm engaged in right now, here at the Delta, with amazing collaborators. I'm part of Another Gulf is Possible, which is a network of folks from Pensacola, Florida to Brownsville, Texas, who are working to envision just environments, just ecologies, and just economies across the Gulf South. And also, we, a few years back, were in conversation with some others, the Delta Collective, and other allies and friends, and just recognizing that, things are changing here really quickly, and we have to learn how to live with water. And so that investigation led to an exhibition that we produced a few years back called Floating Cities. So we were just looking for all kinds of projects all over the world, a lot of them being very high tech, low cost, coming from Southeast Asia, a lot of stuff coming from Africa and the Niger Delta, as well as Tokyo and Bangladesh. And some folks, like, of course, I mean, some projects like in Tokyo and the Netherlands are like super high tech, and very unaffordable for your down the bayou person like myself. But we commissioned, Another Gulf commissioned, my cousin, who's from the Homa Nation, works in the oil field as a welder, and is also a boat builder, to build this aluminum pontoon boat for us. And we've since been adding on these different sides and kind of thinking of it as a swamp lotus that can open up and close. So you can see here we're using it as an exhibition and performance space. And those other panels fold down when we're on water and float. So it's something that we can activate both on land or on water. And also we've been talking more about how it can be used as a just recovery vehicle in times of disaster to be deployed with supplies. And we're now in this community design period process point where we're thinking about all of the solar pieces and thinking about how this moves up and down the Mississippi River. So in dialogue with some other theater folks and working in collaboration specifically with a theater company here in Bulbuncha known as Mondo Bizarro. And our designer, Jeff Becker, helped to build out this beautiful, we were like, we want it to be like a transformer, you know, we want to like shrimp on it. We want to party on it. We want to like have a performance on it and a concert on it. We want to like put two people out who don't agree with each other out in the middle of some water so that they can have dinner together and have a conversation and us document that. So this is a living, breathing thing called the Float Lab. And of course, the collaboration with Mondo Bizarro is on a project called Invisible Rivers. So we're really excited about this. And here's our friend Bruce Sunpi Barnes playing some music. Just earlier this month, we got to bless the Float Lab. So that was really exciting moment. And we were harvesting ideas in our shrimp net, which you can't really see, but it was behind, and we invited community to write their ideas on these little shrimp cards. So excited about that. And here's Jeff Becker and I testing it out in an earlier stage. We were so excited that day. It was like our little lily pad. We opened it up and just kind of laid down and we're like, where's the crawfish? But we're looking forward to activating this in spaces and just showing examples and experimenting. And I think that we're up against so much right now. And what's really most needed is imaginations and collaborations and community. So the Big River has been like a great example of just like continuing these dialogues. And here's an image that was designed by another a studio in the woods alum, a really brilliant human being who's a printmaker, Pippin Frisbee Calder. And our project, Invisible Rivers, which is in collaboration with the Float Lab, was invited to be part of the People's WPA. So making a case and having a cohort of folks that are in communication and proving why now is more important than ever for us to look back in order to look forward. In a sense, I keep thinking about that in regards to our like green energy and technology. We're like, oh, we gotta, we're not inventing anything new, right? Like, I mean, we are, but also at the same time, there are like these beautiful examples and foundations that we should really remind ourselves of and tap into that. So Pippin made this beautiful poster for us, and the Float Lab is there at the bottom with all of its plant material. I run the, as part of Another Gulf is Possible, my program is the Land Memory Bank and Seed Exchange. And so, yeah, I'm learning about the plants, and I'm excited to learn about the plants at the headwaters, and also, we've been thinking a lot about just how there are these the oldest trade route, right, is the Mississippi River. And to activate that, and at this time and these times of change and kind of overwhelming conditions on the planet, that this river that connects us can help us to be in communication and to find solutions, so that we can move forward in healthy and sustainable ways that are in right relationship and are respecting the natural intelligence, of the land and waters. So
I think that I can just see the Float Lab up on Lake Bemidji for a time. We were talking, I said, oh, well, we're up here. We got to figure out how to get up here too. So I think some really interesting things can happen. It's exciting.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're dreaming about it too.
Yeah.
It's definitely a destination, and we're in conversation with Sip Culture and Utica, Mississippi, so in the Delta, Mississippi Delta. And then also Pangea Theater too, our friends in the Twin Cities, and it's just keep going all the way to Itasca would be amazing.
One
Yeah.
person asked Monique, did Venice City participate in the floating cities? Floating cities piece
Did
that you did.
who did?
Did Venice?
Venice. We didn't have any projects from Venice. We didn't do an open call. We just did kind of a deep dive. And no projects from Venice actually came to the top. I mean, really, the most impressive stuff was coming from Southeast Asia, and these like floating gardens, and even like growing food in salt water.
Hmm.
So, but also, remembering that like a couple of my grandmother's children were born on houseboats, and we've gotten really used to controlling the land here or controlling the water, so that we can have land here for a long time. And I think nature keeps reminding us that that's not really sustainable. Um, so, but yeah, it's great. The floating cities, and that's an exhibition that could keep going, and we're hoping to keep sharing, at least some examples with folks.
Yeah. We have several questions. I don't know if but I did want to just say that, this work is it's hugely collaborative. And as Monique was saying, it continues forward and continues to become larger and connected in many different ways. And so it's just a time to thank Studio in the Woods in Louisiana, the Watermark Art Center in Bemidji, and all our collaborators. Everybody is a collaborator in some form or another. The Itasca Biological Field Station, and the College of Biological Science, and Jonathan Schilling, the director, and also the Weisman Art Museum, Creative Collaboratives, and Boris Oischerman, and Extensions Regional Sustainable Development Partnership is one of our funders that's been giving us money and supporting this project. They're a rural foundation that has connected to the University of Minnesota. And of course, we just got a grant to continue forward with these connections of exchange and ways in which people can exchange information, whether it's artists to scientists, artists to artists, community members, and that's something that we can delve into some more another time, or give you some more information through email. And also that's through being funded through the Institute of Advanced Study. I know Monique and Karen, we talked about this earlier, about this idea of exchange as you both go forward in creating a body of work that will show at the Watermark Art Center. I think, are we talking this winter, or are we?
I think it's next spring.
Next spring, okay.
Yeah, but I think, like we were talking, and I feel like this whole idea of getting informed, like talking and visiting with scientists, with historians, and Monique's brain is just incredible in terms of the way that you can get informed about how you think about your relationship with places. And I think what I was really happy about is, like, in particular, I want to thank Sharon and Shirley Nordrum, who were very available to share their knowledge and what they have to give, and the people that opened doors for Monique to come up, and Simon. I think that those individual relationships are the things that are really sustaining and are really going to build our communities in new ways. And I think to think about that idea of the different intelligences that exist, and instead of this sort of I think we have to intersect with this idea that there's some sort of hierarchical system of what is more important information is not of service to the land and to us anymore, and to think about these parallel ways that we can bring what we know, what we care about, what we understand, to come together to, and a critical time that we're in, and share what we know and give what we have to give. Is when we find each other, we can make remarkable change. I think that will make a difference. we just have to think about it that way, I think.
There was another question that came forward in the chat. It came to me and was just like, someone asked like, well, what does the river ask of me? And I was wondering, you've been talking about these pieces, but what have you found perhaps? And maybe when you're at the headwaters, Monique, and which is different from where you are, and Karen, when you think about the river at the Delta, or what does it tell you or ask?
Tells me to listen. I mean, the water is this continuously changing thing, but it's a continuous thing. And I think about, Monique took me to this place where these trees were so magnificent, probably 200 or 300 years old, that they've seen it all. They've seen everything we've done in terms of once the contact happened, they remember. So I think the river remembers. And I think that when we pay attention and we value it, then we start getting an understanding of the things we can do individually and where we can participate collectively to assure, because it will always be there. I mean, we can be teleported up by Scotty, and it's still going to be here doing what it does.
Yeah, I think that a lot of my adult life, I've been like, the wetlands, the wetlands, the wetlands, like we need the wetlands. And I even still think that there's kind of a disconnect here in regards to restoration that, yes, there are these huge projects that are right now, actually, I think today the comment period is closing, but there are these sediment and freshwater diversions just south of Bulbuncha that they're putting in that have never been done before to reconnect the river to the wetlands. Because, we know that you can't restore the wetlands here if you don't have that life force flowing into it. But it's almost like we've engineered ourselves into this ridiculous problem, and now we're trying to re-engineer our way out of it. And I know that the scientists and other folks are like, it's our only hope, but there is a question of like, are we out of time? Is it too little, too late, too soon? And when do we just like let the river do what it wants to do? And where I brought Karen to, which that western edge of the Delta, there's this big river control structure that's just north of Baton Rouge or Estruma. The Corps put that in because they knew that the river wanted to shift and wanted to go a more westerly direction, and that there was all this industry south of where it wanted to shift, and that if they didn't maintain water flow, the 60-40 water flow, I think it's 60-40, that, all the refineries would not be able to operate. So, and those were decisions way in the past, right? Decades ago that were made to hold the river, to like put it in a straitjacket. And I think that, the river has been calling me up into the point where like all of a sudden, like I said, I'm sitting in this Voyager canoe with some strangers being like, I don't think this is a good idea, but there's no turning back now, and I'm so grateful that I did, because even surrounded by all this ugly, like so much ugly, like plastics, facilities, aluminum factories, these granaries, a nuclear power plant. We're like paddling by the nuclear power plant, and there's like water gushing out of it, and you're like, oh, we're at the bottom of the river. There's like tons of other stuff upriver, but it still was like this magical, beautiful force. I was riding the Mississippi, and there was something, similarly to when I was at Itasca, where I was like, oh, I know this water. It was really familiar. The water, the land, everything around it was really like unfamiliar, but the water, I felt that I knew it, in the way that, when I got on that river, that that day where I was like, oh, my people have been flowing with this water for a long time. So yeah, it's really like centered me in this way that like what else matters besides the water, and this is the water that is, you know, my deepest relative.
Mm. Yeah, Arnoville was like, that was where I felt like I know the water. That was like, that was really the connection. This is what I came here for. You know, was to see the Mississippi that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if people have other questions too. There was a couple other questions out there too. But anybody wants like to throw them up in the chat now. We also have our director at Itasca Station, Jonathan Schilling here, and also Boris from the Weisman Art Museum. And I think Ame is here too for Studio in the Woods. So if anybody had any other questions to throw up, it's a good time. It's 8:11 right now.
And I'm just seeing in the chat too that Tim McLean was the water scientist.
Hi, Tim.
Well, and then also that the butterfly, it's kind of close to your name. It's the Kerner.
Yeah, I was so nervous because I just yeah. I was like, I know it. It starts with K. I'm not going to say it wrong. I know. I said it's like almost my name. I cannot forget that again. Thank you, Shirley, and whoever else told me.
I mean, I think that, you know, we are at this this moment where there is an invitation, you know, to. I was just, we were having lunch with some of the Studio in the Woods crew just the other day. And I asked Amy and Cami, I was like, why, and Grace, like, why aren't there more conversations that are happening up and down river? And I was really grateful to, you know, be in dialogue years ago with Hamline University and the Waters to the Sea program for professional development for teachers, and they have a brilliant curriculum that they do with their teachers up at the headwaters and then here as well. And that was the first time that, you know, I was, you know, in dialogue with people in Minnesota, and really, honestly, like, I would say most people don't know where Minnesota is, or like down, like my people down here. My mom was like, oh, she's in Michigan. You know, I'm like, no, Minnesota is like, you know, it's like once you get past Memphis, it doesn't matter, kind of. I mean, it totally does, of course. But, you know, it's like, that's up there. But that up there is, you know, flowing by too. And so yeah, yeah. Leslie Knoll too. Yes, Karen and I were both spacing, and I'm over here like sweating. I cannot believe how warm it's gotten. It's also like raining again. So sorry for all y'all up there experiencing a bit of drought and fire. I saw that Jonathan mentioned that not much rain up north. Strange times.
It's very dry here. It's 88 degrees. They've closed the drive that goes around Lake Itasca called the Wilderness Drive due to the fire danger.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's scary.
It's supposed to get up to 90 around. Somebody told me, I'm like, oh my goodness. It was like I got a freezing warning last week that things are going to freeze. And in a week, we're up to 90. It's like, okay, it's Minnesota, but this is a little extreme, I think. So I don't know.
And Boris, how did this become a creative collaboration between a scientist and a museum, and also with a studio in the woods? Amy.
Hi, sorry I'm not on camera. I'm not in presentable condition. This heat just killed me. Yeah, it was just horribly hot today.
This is Boris. Yeah.
This is Boris. How it became, Jonathan became the director of the Itasca station, and we connected. I believe Jonathan reached out to me because I was establishing this new program at the time at the Weisman Art Museum, where artists collaborate with people at the university. And we started the discussions, and it's 4 hours drive from our museum. So we started to think, okay, how to go about it? What museum can do that, really? And the logical conclusion was we need to work with someone locally to make it a program of local significance. And then, Becca, we happily found you. So, and the rest is history, as we say. But the program, it's 4 years old, and it really tries to seek opportunities for artists and creatives in general to work with people at the university, researchers and not only researchers, on impactful projects, on projects of significance, mostly new projects that begin and continue in a long term, not specifically to do with any discipline. We do projects that relate to prison justice and neuroscience, and in this project in Itasca, about indigenous knowledge and ecology. Jonathan, if you want to add something to the history, please feel free.
I guess my narrative for the relationship with the studio is that they knew what they were doing already in terms of arts residencies that were connected to science programs. And we've been doing lots of research here in terms of the science stuff. And there was an interest there in the Bywater Institute at Tulane in building a little bit more science to the art science part of that equation. So it seemed like a good complement, a good collaboration. And it happened to be at the beginning and the end of the Mississippi, which is cool for all the reasons that Monique and Karen have mentioned. So it works.
I see that there's a question here. Are there any conversations or plans about sharing this inspiring work in collaboration, Ojibwe and Homa, with the Water Walkers and Water is Life and other movements in Indian country? Yes, we want to be in relationship. I think that COVID was such a whoa, and then we were just trying to get Karen here because we kind of we had this momentum and then stopped short. But as I mentioned before, with the Invisible Rivers project, we're in dialogue with Pangea Theater in the Twin Cities, and Sharon Day is actually producing a new piece. So we're really looking forward to seeing that and being in dialogue with all of them. Yeah, Water is Life folks up and down and all around, in solidarity and knowing that, I there was a part of me where I'm like, oh my God, I got to take Karen to Norco, which is the New Orleans refining company. That's the name of the town. But there's one of the oldest and largest refineries there. And then I was like, actually, I don't think we have to go there. And it's overwhelming. It's a really overwhelming place. But I did drive her by 2 refineries in my community.
That was a good insight.
Yeah.
Well, and I think we were talking about how as we build this project, I mean, we're doing this work, we're going to have an exhibit, but certainly we're going to bring community people and people who have an interest in sharing what they're doing and sharing what they know as part of the programming that we're going to do with this project. The exhibit's in about a year, but we have intention of of having it kind of a diverse thing that people have opportunities to meet and learn and know more and share more of the work that they're doing around water and the river in particular.
Yeah, and I always feel like, at this end of the river, if you need a really good, bad example about why you don't want line 3 going through your community, up at the headwaters, like I got lots of reasons why, why that making, those compromises are not worth it. So I think that's, I hate being the bearer of bad news, but I also hope that, like, by telling the story and the witness that I have experienced, that, other places can, that the grannies and the children and everybody holds the line, because, yeah, as I said, we're losing. We've lost so much, and we will lose more in the years to come here. And we're in this kind of adaptation space of uncertainty.
Another question that someone had asked previously too was just about the similarities or differences between peoples, of what you've seen between one end of the river to the other, and communities. And a big question.
I found myself at a table with Karen and some Louisiana people, and I was like, and Karen was just like, I was like, oh yeah, they're having like 5 conversations at once. It can be like that. Like, they're kind of listening. There's always a lot going on. People got a lot to say.
It's different way of communicating, but people are communicating, and just the awareness and the receptivity. I mean, I just felt really welcome everywhere that I went, and I didn't have to be on. I could just be there and kind of witness and see how people did what they did there, and that was really important. I mean, of course, New Orleans and around New Orleans, it's kind of it's a city kind of thing, a little bit more than up here, but people care about the same things. I think people very much are concerned about some of the same issues, and it was good to meet them and to hear what they were doing or what they were dreaming could be, and just how they were enjoying life as well. I mean, that's an important part, is to nurture ourselves and share wonderful things. Best coffee on earth. Got me going. I'm telling you, this girl she's a busy bee.
I think that one of the things that was a little surprising for me, when I was at the headwaters, is that, being here in the Gulf Coast, there's so much diversity, and there's so much, especially here in the urban, the city of so-called New Orleans, is a bit of a concrete lily pad, and it's kind of like a small country town, in a lot of ways, at certain times. But the diversity of folks that have lived kind of on top of each other, for generations, African, Indigenous, French, Spanish, Italian, Irish, all of the immigrant. I mean, New Orleans was second only to New York in accepting immigrants into, the so-called United States. So there's a lot of diversity here. And also, just to say that, like, I've driven around the South most of my life, and yeah, you like see Confederate flags flying in people's yards, and I don't know, there was just something about, I think, how, the reservations are these, kind of lines, dividing lines between the, white kind of settler communities and indigenous communities. And that was really it just was something that I had never really experienced in that kind of way before, and feeling like when you cross a line, you're in like two different worlds, in a sense. So that was something that I wasn't expecting. But then also recognizing that because of, the Anishinaabe were so smart in negotiating their land and water rights, and having to, be forced to make these agreements with the United States government, whereas the Huma, we've never ceded, we've never signed any sort of agreement. We've had one of the longest standing relationships with the Bureau of Indian Affairs going back to, the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, but we remain federally unrecognized, and are fighting for recognition, which sounds so dumb to say. I was like, what? We are who we are, but that's a whole other segue. But yeah, just to say that, because of the isolation or the small communities, on the reservation, that it's very, significant and impressive to see how culture has remained intact, how language is still, and ceremony and those traditions, which because of, seeing how my people here at the other end of the river have been, scattered, and how that's something that's still taking place as we're facing these, new conditions of being forced with, do we lift our house 20 feet in the sky and hope that we can get flood insurance, or do we leave to higher ground, or do we remain and reclaim? What could that look like too, or retreat and return?
Another question was, what happens next? What's happening with the project in the future? And we're really at this place now, within the pandemic, things shifting, where we start to create more exchange. And I think that's what, so much about what we've been talking about tonight, is to how do we create exchanges between different peoples and ways of communicating. If you guys had anything else you want to carry that forward, or what you see as the future within this project. Like we said, we'll be exploring seasonally what that means as exchanges from one end of the river to the other end of the river, and everywhere in between, what that can look like. We don't have answers, but we have a idea of what we would like to, see what we can come up with.
Yeah, and to say that, we have partners that we're really excited to dive deeper into dialogue and to co-create. I think it's not about us. It's about all of us, and we have particular skill sets and insight, and so do many others, coming from traditional knowledge, coming from academia, coming from policy making, and we're at a time where, just to say again, and kind of like leaning into those old trade routes, and recognizing that migrations are sometimes necessary, just as Karen's grandmother, for some reason, found her way here into the Delta and then got back upriver, and just my own family have had these migrations just here in the Delta, and human nature and animals are moving, as the river is flowing. And just to circle back to our title, bloom like a wildflower in a hurricane, flow like a river, those are great metaphors for life. And just this past, so hurricane season's open. But it started early, about 2 weeks. There was a storm out in the Gulf, already. So, You know, last season was really brutal. Like every couple of weeks, we're like, is it going there? Is it going there? There's two. They're gonna like collide. You know, like, oh my God, it was so insane. And I'm not feeling really good about this one that's on the horizon. But when I came home from being evacuated, you know, all of my little wildflowers were like this, and they just kept going. And I think that, you know, we got to hold on and remember that our community can really you know, being in community can really save us and to help us to be stronger and to you know, pave the way for the next generations. Not pave, plant. We're not paving anything.
Anything else?
We keep talking. Heat is on. We're at 8:30. I wanted, if there's just really honored for everybody to have been able to be here together at this time.
Yeah, thank you.
To share the insights and the things that have been coming forward through this Big River Continuum.
Yeah, and also to say just, yeah, big thanks to, you know, there are the institutions and there are the individuals that believe that good things are growing. And so big thanks to Rebecca for, you know, helping to be a connector and yeah, so much gratitude to you, and also to Boris and Jonathan and Cami and Amy from Studio in the Woods, because it's really, yeah, individuals who make things, who water the garden. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Even in a drought, we'll find a way. Even if you're boiling water on your stove, it's a hurricane. Anyway.
Yeah, I think it's just connections are always important, and connections, when you tie things together, you have strength. So I think we're kind of at this place. We know some of the things we're doing next, and part of it is opening the door for what's to be next. Who's going to share next, who's got the next piece of information that's vital and significant and will serve a purpose of that health of ourselves, of the water, of, you know, what it's always ongoing. And I think that's one thing I found that is similar between, I always thought that science was this very finite structured thing, and I realized scientists and artists are very much think the same way. They have an idea, they have theories, and they start experimenting, and then they figure things out as they go. And so I think there's a lot of common ground to move forward with the work that we're doing.
Well, I wish we were singers.
Yeah, no.
Wait, maybe shower singers, but you know, ways. But I want to
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming.
We'll send out email, some resources, and all that good
Give
stuff.
some questions.
Bye, Circe.
See you.